opportunities and solutions to equity and equality. And Ms. Sabina Gasimova from IDEA, an NGO from Azerbaijan, has kindly agreed to moderate this open dialogue. On behalf of the conference, I warmly welcome our moderator and all our distinguished speakers today. Without further ado, I now turn the meeting over to the moderator of this dialogue, Ms. Sabina Gasimova.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to extend my warm greetings and welcome to all the delegates and guests of this session. Before we launch the session, we, the CSOs, would like to honor the memories of our 3 land heroes, the dear-to-heart members of the CSO family, whom we lost over the past 2 years. Khadija Catherine Razavi, an advocate for the persistent existence of indigenous people and local communities. Bhavani Shankar Kusum, a great defender of the earth, a father and a mentor of many newcomer CSOs. Mark Beat Shachton, a beloved scientist who has embraced land issues in drylands, being actively involved in several scientific institutions. On this note, I'd like to invite my colleagues to the stage to share their cherished moments and accomplishments with our lost fellows. Patrice Nahid Darmandir, can you please come to the stage? Patrice, please have the floor. We'll start with you. Thank you.
Madame Chair, merci. Chers participants, je suis Patrice Burger d'une ONG française qui s'appelle le CARI. Et chers délégués et chers membres de la famille,
delegates and members of the family of this Convention to Combat Desertification, I would like to greet you and address you from a rather unusual point of view in the context of our convention. In every system, there are some points, some moments where you understand better than at other times that certain elements are more essential because they give meaning to the rest. It's just like that in our community, and it's like that in our ecosystems, the ones we talk about so often in our discussions. But we know much about many things, but we don't understand enough about the interactions between them. That escapes our understanding. So since this whole movement was born in Rio, and then continued in Paris in 1994, we know that countries, public bodies, donors, and the organizations which we all belong to, that they are there. But let's also look to those who bring us something different, men and women who, through the example of their own lives, bring us something different. They make things possible for our lands and our soils. The pandemic separated many of us cruelly from those who would have traveled together with them further along the way. And when that happened to so many of us, we understood that it's life that is one of those essentials. Because the lives of others inspire our lives. So may I offer posthumous homage to 3 of the people from our desertification community, from our civil society community, and who are part of the idea that has been expressed so well when it has been said that the only way God can act is through the hands of humans.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates, friends, and colleagues. As a member of the CSO community of the UNCCD from Iran, Senesta, I would like to thank the Secretariat, distinguished delegates, and our colleagues and friends from civil society organizations and other national and international partners of the UNCCD for being here with us in this moment. I confess that it's not so easy to talk about our mentor, friend, companion, sister, and kind mother, Dr. Khadija Katrin Razavi. She believed that death is not the end of the life, but part of it. Thereby, by believing in her immortality and with her gift of patience and strong will, I declare that we will continue on her way. Katrin was a source of love, generosity, modesty, hope, and kindness, which are rooted in nature. Indeed, she was one of the most companion mothers of nature and one of the most knowledgeable and honest companions in nature conservation at various levels. Her tireless efforts in preserving the biocultural diversity of all communities will last in hearts and minds of those who have known her even for a little while. She started her relentless endeavor after the UN Conference on the Human Environment since early 1917, and along with her husband Muhammad Taghi Farbar, strive to pay special attention to nature conservation, the interaction between human and nature, and preserving and promoting the colorful and priceless cultures and socio-ecological values of indigenous and local communities. They founded Senesta in 1990s and as CSO played an important role and worked willingly and responsibly day and night to codify the national strategy for the sustainable development based on the Agenda 21 of the UNDP with 150 national experts after Rio Convention on Environment and Development with the support of Department of Environment and UN Development Program. She was an outspoken, strong, and unwavering voice for the non-human environment and an important advocate for the persistent existence of indigenous and local communities and the integrity of their territories. She was resolved in her belief that every country and every community already has its ancestral knowledge and culture that ensure food security and sovereignty, sustainable use of water resources, conservation of nature, and many other aspects of it. Senesta, understandably, will take some time to come to terms with this sadness and the fact that she is not with us anymore. In the meantime, we remember her love, her tireless work as a voice for the rights of local small-scale farmers and mobile pastoralists, and send our love and thoughts to her family and friends and colleagues, and we are determined to honor her rich legacy and continue her struggle. Thank you.
Thank you. Dharmandir, have the floor, please.
Esteemed President of the COPS session and the chairperson of the panel discussion and the distinguished members on and off the dais. Good evening to all of you. At the outset, I'm happy on one side and I'm feeling a bit disappointed with the passing away of an excellent personality from India. As introduced in the introductory remarks, he was an asset. He was like an associate in not an individual, but he's an institution in himself. He is none other than Mr. Bhavani Shankar, the founder president and also the founder of Gram Bharati Samiti, Jaipur, India. I'm honored and privileged to speak about his contributions for the social development in India and also across, and his contributions in UNCCD. If you look into the background of Mr. Bhavani Shankar, he took his birth in a small district in Jaipur, nearby Jaipur in the state of Rajasthan in India. And he has completed his post-graduation in sociology. And since from his childhood, he had a lot of issues and challenges. He has come across a lot of challenges in terms of his education and also passion, which he could surpass absolutely with passion and success. And then at an younger age, he took a passion, out of his interest and passion, he took a contribution as a journalist, as a freelance writer for renowned Indian articles and magazines. And at that time, he was associated with a very good social political movement, which was initiated by Jay Prakash Narayan ji. In that committee, there were 6 members, an important committee, which was constituted at the country level. Out of that 6 members, Bhavani Shankar ji was one among them. And after certain years, when the movement was going on, all the remaining 5 members, they entered into politics. But Bhavani Shankar ji, he did not take politics as his passion, but he took a social development profession, and that's how his journey into social development began. Then, apart from this, he's also a very good author. He has written a very book on Pakistan, A Successful Journey, and also has written a book on Takshashila, and he has helped a lot of organizations in India. Especially, he helped and facilitated 51 community-based organizations to get accredited with UNCCD. That is a wonderful contribution from the gentleman. I think he deserves a big round of appreciations. Then moving further, he was also a CSO panel member. His contribution, his intention was only one: to help and facilitate the grassroots level organizations in India to reach to the international level. And this contribution was exceptional and phenomenal in terms of social development and UNCCD is concerned. And that is his passion, which helped to conduct a UNCCD COP14, which happened in India, where the contributions of Bhavani Shankar ji was exceptional and outstanding. Then when you look into the professional background, he did a lot of efforts for leprosy patients, HIV patients, education, and also the local prostitution which went on. And he also did a lot of efforts in harvesting, natural resource management. And there was a wonderful initiation which was taken up at Gandhi Van, which is 100-acre land, which was unused. Over the years, he is the man behind the show. You could convert that wasteland into a social forestry. It has become a prototype even for the government of India, and also many of the members of UNCCD have visited. We are fortunate that India is recognized at the UNCCD level. Then he firmly believes in the ideology of Gandhiji. He was very simple. And when you recollect his personality, I remember one quotation: actions speak louder than words. He was extremely committed for whatever he said. And for his contributions, he has got many recognitions. And there was one important award which was given in the year 2019. That was Jamnalal Bajaj Award, Outstanding Work in the Construction Field, which was given at the country level. And then he was also associated with Vinoba Bhave, Baba Amte, and S.N. Subbarao, and many other phenomenal personalities of India and abroad. He was a very good traveler across the world. And then he is also, as I told you, he is a man from simplicity, a man who has overcome challenges, a man who extended his help to community-based organizations and helped them to get into UNCCD. That was this exceptional phenomenon. And he is also a CSO panel member. Individually, he planted 1 lakh trees, and he was a key person, as I told you, in organizing COP14 at Noida. And I feel extremely sorry of the physical departure of Sri Bhavani Shankar ji, and I really thank and grateful to the UNCCD for the chair and also the president for a wonderful opportunity recollecting all the memories of Bhavani Shankar ji and contributions to India and also UNCCD. Thank you very much. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Dharma dear. Patrice.
Je reviens.
I'm back with the great honor to talk about some French scientists, Marc Biéchaton, who died just before this COP. Marc Biéchaton, since the 70s, he was working in Madagascar as a geographer and an agronomist. And then in 1990, he was one of the authors of the concept of setting up the observatory, observing the Sahel. And he was head of the executive secretary of that organization up until 2014. He never stopped being a participant in all the different organizations of which he had been a part and supported them throughout his whole life. Up until 1999, he was head of the environmental service of the FAO in Rome. He was particularly concerned with the environmental aspects of development for the South countries and the multilateral management of the environment through the United Nations conventions. He was a member of the Scientific Committee of France on desertification from 1990, from the very first conference of the parties, which took place in Rome. And he was then chair of this French Scientific Committee up until 2006, and then from 2006 to 2009, he worked on producing scientific documentation which was accessible to the wider public, so as to make people understand what desertification, what land degradation were about, by having these thematic dossiers for the French Scientific Committee on desertification. He was also one of the co-founders of European Desert Net and then International Desert Net networks on desertification. And then he was a part of the French input to the convention and to the strategy on desertification. And as professor in the university at Versailles, he was passing on his knowledge to his students. And from 2000 to 2003, he was doyen of the faculty, and then he became professor emeritus. I'm telling you all this because Mark will never leave us, in fact, because he is seen as a man with gifts, with a natural authority, who was kind, cheerful, and playful even, as he helped his students and the people he spoke with to seek their own way to an understanding of what desertification is about and land degradation and how to combat them. He was a man of convictions and of courage, a man of generosity, always very discreet. We will never know how and how much he was able over the course of his professional and personal life to put right humanitarian crises in France, because he always was so modest in working hand in hand with his African colleagues too. He could never remain indifferent to injustice or to indifference itself. He was a long-term source of inspiration for all those who care about the land. So we pay homage to him here.
Thank you, Patrice. Thank you, colleagues. Ladies and gentlemen, now I would like to invite you all to observe 1 minute silence as a token of respect and sympathy to our deceased colleagues. May their souls rest in peace. Thank you, everyone. Now, I'm pleased to give the floor to Executive Secretary for some remarks on his open dialogue session.
Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's a real honor to have you all here as members of the civil society organizations, but also as parties. When I joined the UNCCT and went to COP14, I was very happy to see CSOs interacting directly with parties in a very formal way, in a plenary hall, with all simultaneous translation, interpretation in the United Nations languages, and really having a dialogue. That means a lot to me, and I would like to cherish this moment with you today and hope that you will have a very fruitful dialogue amongst yourselves as CSOs, but also with parties. We need that dialogue because each one of us, each organization, and each government, and each private sector company has a role to play. We are dealing with one of the most important issues on earth, which is land. We are dealing with the land that produces our food. We are dealing with the land that produces part of the oxygen we breathe, with land that is protecting us from floods, with the land that is building our resilience when the time comes with the drought, with the land that is providing us with the water we drink. We as humanity should come together like never before, because the situation we are faced with at the moment and that is going to come in the future, if we are not careful, may be extremely dire. Yes, many of us have heard these kinds of reports that have come to the world with some alarms. But the last Global Land Outlook is another wake-up call, not only informing us of the findings of science on land, the latest findings on science. Until recently, we thought that the situation was not that global. Until recently, some people thought that land degradation only happens in some parts of the world, not in the other parts. Still now, I have to say, when I see the reports coming from our different parties, I know that some parties are not fully reporting land degradation because they don't know it. They have not assessed the health of their soil, and they have not really comprehensively analyzed the situation. We, as community, CSOs and parties, have to make every effort to inform ourselves and to inform our communities and our governments of the real situation of land in our parties, of the real situation of the global land we live on and we live off. Ladies and gentlemen, the Global Land Outlook that was produced just 2 weeks ago gives us that image. The image is not good. But at the same time, the report tells us that we have to do something. And actually, the nice thing about that report is that it gives us multiple solutions that can help us respond to multiple challenges that the world is faced with at the moment. When the report says restoring degraded land in the world can create wealth, it's GDP. I think this should be taken seriously, because either you degrade your GDP, meaning you degrade land and you lose your GDP, or you restore land and you rebuild your GDP. Now think that we are still in the middle of a pandemic, and we are still in the middle of wars and conflicts that are preventing us from having access to some parts of the world. Or food shortages are going to create multiple challenges. Or land degraded in some parts of the world are affecting distribution of food in other parts of the world. So the Global Land Outlook gives us that image that it is possible to rebuild and to repair our planet and to rebuild our economy. The Global Land Outlook further says that if you restore land, that will have a positive effect on your health. Because when land is degraded to the point that it is affecting your own health, then you need to do something about it. And land restoration is an effective way of contributing to the health of yourself and the health of the food you eat. Further, the report is saying that if we restore land according to the 3 scenarios that have been developed in that, and I will just focus on the 3rd scenario, because to me it is the best scenario, even though we may only achieve it by 2050, But that scenario says that if you restore land, if you take it seriously, and if you do it now, it will be good for your economy, it will be good for the planet, it will be responding positively to your ambition about combating climate change, it will contribute to your efforts in restoring biodiversity and contributing to the global biodiversity negotiations that are happening, the global biodiversity outlook. So it is important that we see this as in common. I don't think we can resolve any of these issues without cooperation, without CSOs working with governments, without CSOs working with the private sector, without the private sector working with governments. All of us should put our hands together. The other beauty of the land restoration is that it should be done by everybody. Now, it's very easy to blame governments and say there's no political will. It's like an excuse. But for land restoration, it's for everybody. It's for the farmer. It's for the civil society organization, the small NGO, the indigenous persons and people in the world, because we all have something to do and we can all do something. As I used to say, you don't need a PhD to do land restoration. You don't have to be coming out of a polytechnic school to do land restoration. It's democratic. And when you do it, you see yourself. You don't even wait until the next generation to see the impact. It's almost automatic. When you improve your productivity, if you do the right agricultural practices, if you change the way some of your practices to improve the health of your land, you see the immediate results. It's short term. And you build then the long term from that action. So, ladies and gentlemen, I just wanted to say hello to all of you, to thank you for coming, and to tell you that we, as the Secretariat of the UNCCD, we truly appreciate the contributions from the civil society organizations. I am fully aware that your parties are also listening to you. You know, you take the land tenure discussions that you started a few years ago that have been adopted by your parties were adopted by your parties in New Delhi, and I'm sure you will have listening ears, and I really cherish that collaboration that I see between parties and civil society organizations, because that is not always the case in other fora. So thank you very much for that. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much, Executive Secretary, for your inspirational words. I now announce the start of the session which brings together land users, land protectors, and policymakers to unfold the challenges and discover the opportunities for joint solutions to ultimately drive progress in the sustainable and equal management of land. And with this said, I now turn over to the panel and invite the CSO members for their presentations. I'm pleased to introduce our first speaker, Alai Ismail Bizo, on behalf of African CSOs from the Youth Association for the Environment and Civic Education in Niger. Ismail, you may start now. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you very much. President of the COP, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, member states to the convention, I'm extremely happy and honored as a young person from civil society to take the floor here as a representative of African civil society. I come from a new young organization in Niger, where in our country, 2/3 of the country are covered by desert. Soil degradation is one of the major challenges. Africa is particularly vulnerable to such degradation of its soils and to drought, and is the region which suffers the most. 45% of the surface of Africa is degraded, and 55% is exposed to a major risk of degradation, according to the relevant and reliable data. By 2030, if nothing is done, 1/3 of its land will be lost to Africa. Youth suffer from this the most. Most youth live under the poverty threshold and do not have sufficient capacities to face these challenges. Desertification has impacts also in a greater manner on women, particularly in rural areas where they are on very different terms. They are not on terms of equality with their male counterparts. If I take the position of Senegal, 85% of women know how to deal with land and to run it. And in Congo, women provide 60% of agricultural production, yet only own 21% for the land. They're not allowed to have access to ownership. And this is a situation which is current across most countries in Africa at the moment. And one of the other problems that we need to face, along with degradation of our soils, is migration. Displacement is common for populations, particularly those who are the most vulnerable: youth, children, women. According to a World Bank report, by 2050, if nothing is done, several million people, particularly in West Africa, will be forced to move further inland in their own countries or to leave their countries because of droughts and the lack of productivity, the risk of storms and the effects of storms. If I take the situation in my own country, Niger, we could have about 19.5 million displaced people, more than 30.26% of its population. In other countries, such as in Benin, internal displacement could represent 45% of all of their internally displaced migrants. Given this situation, this is obviously not possible for us to continue like this. But most of our people think that another future is possible, and we must remain positive. And that's the reason why we have come to this COP, because we wanted to recall to you that we must act together, and we must act now and immediately. Civil society in Africa has many initiatives which are harbingers of hope and which will give significant results and just need to be brought to scale. Integrated projects on restoration of soil by looking at ownership of land, value chains, entrepreneurship, making sure that our forests are protected. Also actions in terms of lobbying, in terms of access to ownership of land, particularly for rural women. Civil society has worked on this and has many interesting responses for regeneration and work within our forests, as we can find in Niger, in Senegal, Benin, and Tanzania. Other techniques on the transformation of waste, which can be used for energy and using local species, and this can have a high value level, but also the use of new technologies for communication and for information in terms of management and prevention of conflicts around scarce natural resources. In the forest of Congo, which can be seen from beyond the planet, preventive measures are being taken to safeguard these ecosystems. Ladies and gentlemen, President of this COP, along with these echoes of hope of millions of women, youth, and farmers that we represent, we would like to address to you some of our recommendations to strengthen and implement land laws, access to land for women and youth as a priority, to facilitate access of youth and women to natural resources and to financial resources so that they have the necessary means to achieve resilience and to stem the flow of migration, to restore land that has been devastated, to reforest in the Great Congo Basin, to make sure that those who are the guardians of these forests are able to manage them and to protect these forests. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe that we have a window, a small window. It is closing. We need to take this opportunity to act now and to act immediately. Thank you.
Allah Ismail, thank you for your meaningful presentation. Next, I would like to invite our second speaker, Hemanta Waitanage, from the Center for Environmental Justice, Sri Lanka, representing Asian CSOs. Hemanta, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. President of the COP, Executive Secretary of UNCCD, and distinguished guests. First, let me thank Executive Secretary for his words and encouragements to find solutions together. As he's mentioned, desertification, climate change, and biodiversity destruction are interconnected issues. They all have connection with the soil and the land. But across the world, we see that land has been mishandled and controlled by the state and by the corporations. More and more forest areas have been converted into monocultures, such as maize, banana, sugarcane, soya, oil farm, etc. Meanwhile, forest fires and human settlements and infrastructure development also destroy lands. In my country alone, more than 500,000 hectares have been converted, have been deregulated in the recent past for development activities. While ecological agricultural practices still exist among communities, modern agriculture kills soil through land mismanagement and chemical use. Topsoil erosion, killing friendly microorganisms are major concerns across the world. Land tenure is also a major concern across the world. In many Asian countries, 74% of the land is still owned by the state. I think when it comes to Africa, almost like 80% of the land is owned by the governments. It is the responsibility of the government as well as the public. I'm not suggesting that government should take the full responsibility of land management, as the Executive Secretary already mentioned about it's a collaborative effort by the people as well as the governments. They provide hundreds of ecosystem services for the benefit of all. However, we should find a way to resolve the issues around the land and provide full control of agricultural lands to farmers on the ground. Meantime, promoting collaborative management of the common lands, keeping them for the interest of the rights of nature and for future generations is also essential. We would invite state parties and the multilateral bodies to find mechanisms to bring land protection, common property concepts, and other mechanisms to resolve these disputes. We know corporates and military control over the land is a major issue across the world. Frontline communities and the environmental human rights defenders have an enormous pressure from the governments, corporations, and the military to evict people and dispose of land. This is a matter that we should discuss at this forum too. State parties should ensure transparent and equitable land management policies at the national level. Many countries in the Asia region, people are losing many land areas due to the river erosion. People are becoming landless, and there should be some adaptation promoted in this case. It can be only done with an integrated policy approach, and initiatives also need to be explored. Here, I want to highlight few solutions for land management. The first solution I am proposing is the agroecological practices. This has been one of the traditional practices local communities have been using, which was destroyed by the modern agriculture and the chemical agriculture. This concept is gaining ground among the farmers as they have learned the negative implications of the modern farming, including loss of access to seed banks. The solutions for droughts, climate change lie with this approach. However, we must know that corporations are not in line with this, as they cannot make profits of the from the food system. My home country, Sri Lanka, made a wrong entry to convert chemical agriculture to organic agriculture, which is one of the major reasons for the ongoing crisis in Sri Lanka. Therefore, global and national policymaking is essential to promote such practices. I hope this forum can provide guidance to parties to how to move forward. The second approach is about analog forestry. Some Asian countries, African, Latin American countries are practicing analog forestry, food forest, etc., to build the topsoil in degraded lands and plant multiple trees to provide food, medicine, and habitats. This should be considered for converting degraded lands into fertile forest areas while regulating the water table and many other services that come from the forest. Once again, UNCCD is a good platform to guide the countries to bring such approaches and policy changes. The third proposal is national land policies. National land management policies are a complicated issue. However, if we don't resolve these issues, it will lead to many disputes across the world. Some land policies brought by the colonial rulers disregarding the traditional land management systems are not relevant anymore. Such research has been already done by various research bodies and multilateral bodies to resolve these issues. I think UNCCD yesterday launched some guidance, but state parties immediately need to bring it to the ground. The fourth issue I want to propose is the sustainable range management. In this scope, we welcome the high focus on the rangeland and the grassland, which cover vast parts of the Earth's land mass and provide vital ecosystem services. Mobile pastoralists have an important role in sustainable range management and controlling to achieve land degradation neutrality as one of the key right holders. We seek UNCCD to provide necessary guidelines and advice to the state parties how their rights can be protected while managing their threats to land. The last proposal is community participation. As Executive Secretary already mentioned, that collaborative approach is the best way. So we want to advocate the parties to come up with a clear declaration regarding protecting land rights for the indigenous communities. And also the governments need to ensure that collaboration with local communities, women, youth, and civil society organizations in sustainable land management. So my final message is actually, although we make these global policies with good intention, it doesn't goes down to the local communities, to the provincial level, regional level, so when it reaches the ground level, the destruction already there. So I think the policy coherence between the global and the national level and the regional level is very, very important to achieve this task. I thank you.
Thank you, Hermanta, for your valuable sharings. I just wanted to add, strengthened land management needs policy adaptations, and as you said, collaborative approaches provide just a perfect tool for reaching this. Our next speaker is Ruth Spencer, representing CSOs from Latin America and the Caribbean. Ruth is from Zero Waste Antigua. Ruth, the floor is yours. Thank you. Ruth, turn on your microphone, please.
It's good to be here with you today. I bring greetings from the many local communities from the Latin American, Caribbean region, and globally. Many have said, please be a voice for us. And we have many solutions at the local level that can be shared, that can be upscaled and bring answers to the plight that we are going through. Our last speaker said many of the global policies don't reach down far enough. But local communities, they are alarmists. Before the problem is detected at the national level, they see what's happening at the ground and they send out the alarms. I get telephone calls, I get emails. What's happening? I see rampant land clearing taking place. Machines are pushing down. They send the alarm. And once they send the alarm, we contact the government agency. What's happening? Why are lands being cleared? We the people don't know about it. The same thing with our ecosystems. If we don't manage these ecosystems, how are we going to become resilient? The ecosystems are what provide food for us, fisheries, most importantly for small island states where I'm from, they are our protection. When those natural disasters come, if those mangroves aren't there to protect us from those waves and their storms, we are going to be perished. So we as local communities, we are not going to sit down and wait for harm and then provide the evidence to the donors. No, we are going to send out signals that something is not right and actions have to be taken. I work with many groups in Antigua. They have ideas, they have solutions, but many times nobody listens to them. And local people don't like to be disrespected. They go to the banks to get a little loan. They're rejected. They cannot meet the debt service ratio. But they want to have impact. They want to be able to do something. So a lot of ideas, a lot of innovations come to me, and I have to have a gender lens that's very broad. I have to see everybody. I cannot just sit on government committees and deal with government matters. My lens has to include the disabled persons, those with HIV/AIDS, those mothers with many children who are looking for hope. And I'm appealing to donors today here. It might take more work to channel resources to the local level, but this is the way that solutions come. The solutions are at the ground. Tree planting activities, restoring reservoirs. These are how we react in the local communities to situations. I got a call from a nurse. Please come and help us. The clinic is filled with so many mothers with young children because of the impact of drought causing health and sanitary problems. When you get these situations, you have to respond. If you're really concerned about people, you cannot sit down and wait. So when I go and meet groups, sometimes I tell them arrange a building, sometimes a building is not open, so we talk under the street lights. I try in my small way to carry out VRAs. I ask the questions, and they come up with the solutions. Then we have to find resources to make things happen. Sometimes no resources is there. We have to do in kind. We have to reach out to the private sector, reach out to government agencies. But as a result of people becoming empowered, using their voices for advocacy, we have seen a growth in the civil society organizations that are taking actions to build resilience, actions to mitigate the drought, mitigate the impacts from climate. And we see a movement now towards greater engagement. My country is one of the countries that have ratified the Escazú Agreement for Latin America and the Caribbean, and that gives us power. And when I hear projects coming to the island and the people didn't get a chance to have consultations, I hear them on the radio say, you ratified the Escazú Agreement, where's the consultations? And you know, it wakes up the government. The people are listening. The people want to be part of the solution. And we have to have new voices now in decision making. It's not business as usual approach. Everybody has to come together in the solutions. We have to listen to each other. We have to work together going forward. So my desire here, coming to this COP, is to tell the donors, is to tell the parties, solutions are there, but we have to work together. Going forward, all our countries can meet the challenges, but everyone has a voice, and that needs to be respected. Thank you.
Ruth Spencer, thank you for your strong remarks. Next, I would like to invite Beth Roberts from Landesa, USA, representing Western European and others group CSOs. Beth, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Well, I have the pleasure and the challenge of following my colleague Ruth. Thank you, Ruth, for those incredibly strong words, and thank you to my other colleagues on the panel. It's such a pleasure to be here with you. And good evening to distinguished delegates and colleagues in the room. So my name is Beth Roberts. I'm the director for the Center for Women's Land Rights with Landesa. Landesa is an international land rights organization. We work on securing land rights and land governance. We work directly with governments around the world, and we've been doing so for over 40 years. We work directly with civil society and grassroots organizations. Gender equal and socially inclusive rights to land, mostly in rural areas. And I am joining this panel tonight to present on an options paper tenure and land degradation neutrality. And this paper is a response to a request from you all. That was part of Decision 26 on land tenure at COP14. And this was a request for the Secretariat to explore options on awareness raising on responsible land governance. And so Landesa was honored to produce this options paper under the supervision of the Secretariat. I want to acknowledge and give thanks to the steering committee that guided drafting of this paper as well, which was composed of representatives from the UNCCD, the Food and Agricultural Organization, the Land Portal Foundation, the International Land Coalition, and the UNCCD's Civil Society Organization panel. So before I go into these 4 steps, which are really the outline for the paper, and I'll give you a flyover of this options paper this evening, and I'm really here to encourage you to dig deeper into the paper and then to follow up with the Secretariat. And I'm, of course, very eager to be a resource for you as well. And just to give you some examples of what's in the paper, in the hopes that this is a exciting response to your request for awareness raising options on land tenure. So before I go on to these 4 steps, and I want to give you just an encouragement that the key stakeholders in this paper are first and foremost the parties to the UNCCD. So we are really hoping for parties to take the lead on awareness raising, to play a key role in thinking through what is the contextual approach to awareness raising in the context of, in your own national context. And of course, there are other key stakeholders for awareness raising, UN bodies and international orgs are specifically named within the paper, as well as development partners and international funding institutions, subnational and local governments, and civil society and private sector actors. So this is really a collaborative effort. Really, we believe that there is increasingly understanding that land tenure is a fundamental component of the enabling environment for land degradation neutrality, and that we all recognize the immense technical challenge, both of land tenure and governance, as well as land degradation neutrality, and that the integration of those two really does require intensive collaboration and awareness raising that is a two-way street, both between those at the grassroots level and at the national and global levels. And so there's a key role to play for parties, but also for many other for other stakeholders as well. So what are the steps of the paper? First, to draft an action plan. This is really context setting. So understanding what are the initiatives that are currently underway, both for land tenure, land reforms, legislative efforts, as well as land degradation neutrality. This is really a getting people into the same room step. So we often find that there is a siloing effect going on for these kinds of initiatives. So getting folks from the Gender Ministry into the same room with folks from the Ministry of Environment, as well as land administration agencies, folks that are responsible for these initiatives, and having a conversation on what stage are efforts, what initiatives are going on, and where do we start on raising awareness across these initiatives so that folks that are responsible have a deeper understanding. And then what kinds of awareness need to be raised from the national level down to the local level, and how could we most effectively raise that awareness? What modes are available to us? And the paper includes a number of different suggestions on how you might do that. So I'll invite you to take a look at that. The second step is to identify and partner with target audiences. So from the beginning, looking at who in the national context needs awareness raised. Is it our colleagues in a different agency? Is it folks at the grassroots level? Is it that there is a need for greater technical awareness on land degradation neutrality initiatives amongst grassroots actors? Is it that grassroots actors need to raise awareness for folks at the national level on tenure issues? The third step is to adopt key messaging. And again, here we're working together collaboratively with stakeholders across both land tenure issues and land degradation neutrality issues. So there's a set of examples within the paper. I'll share just one with you here. So secure tenure provides a foundation for lasting solutions for life on land. So the paper is looking for ways to develop contextualized, pithy, short messages that really encapsulate what is the relationship between land tenure and land degradation neutrality, and why is this an essential component of having a thriving planet for all of us. A thriving planet for humanity and a thriving planet for ecosystems. And how do we develop messaging that can be delivered easily and be delivered in a way that everyone can relate to and be delivered in a way that's contextually relevant? And then finally, how do we evaluate the success of these awareness-raising efforts? How do we learn from the process of this awareness-raising efforts, and how do we adapt them? And the paper suggests a parallel monitoring and evaluation approach to allow implementers who are raising awareness to adjust activities based on real-time feedback. So how well are we doing raising this awareness? So that those activities are able to be adjusted as they are being implemented. And the paper also includes a set of example indicators that can be used or adapted for national or local contexts. Can I go to the next slide, please? So the paper also includes an integrated gender equality and social inclusion approach, or a GESI approach. So what do we mean by this? So this means, and again, I think Ruth encapsulated this very well. This means that we are looking across a wide variety of vulnerable groups and making sure that we are honoring human rights to participation and also the wide spectrum of human rights, and that we are ensuring that we're honoring the mandate of the Sustainable Development Goals to leave no one behind. So the first step for integrating a GESI approach is to identify who are the vulnerable groups in the context. The paper gives further information, detailed information on 6 specific vulnerable groups, and those groups are women, indigenous peoples and local communities, youth, pastoralists, migrants, and people living with disabilities. This list is not meant to be exhaustive, and stakeholders can and should identify and work with additional vulnerable groups within their context. So also for a GESI approach, we encourage parties and other stakeholders to consider intersectionality. So what are the layers of vulnerability and marginalization that a woman, for example, might experience if she is also an ethnic minority, if she is divorced, if she lives in a rural area. So as we add layers of marginalization, how does a woman experience her identity as a woman, for example? So considering intersectionality and what does that mean for raising awareness about the relationship between land tenure and land degradation neutrality. People who are members of marginalized groups are going to experience the impacts of insecure tenure as well as the impacts of land degradation differently. And understanding that as we're building awareness of both issues is crucial to having the right messaging and having the right impact. So finally, and then the third element is considering specific challenges and needs of groups. As you're raising awareness, how do we get the right people in the room? How do we ensure that vulnerable groups are included? How do we issue invitations in ways that vulnerable groups will feel comfortable to accept, and that groups that hold power will be willing to include those vulnerable groups as well? And then finally, considering power dynamics between groups. At the national level, this might be a power dynamic of education versus the knowledge of indigenous peoples or local communities. It's the power dynamic of resources at the national or international level versus the needs and interests of local communities. So in developing awareness raising, what are the interests that we're balancing, and how do we make sure that those power dynamics are neutralized as much as possible in any given context to allow real dialogue to take place? I want to note, as I'm wrapping up, that we've had a number, at least 2 land tenure events already during the COP. There was the roundtable and the launch of the voluntary guidelines on the governance of tenure, the technical guide on integrating the VGGT into land degradation neutrality programming. And in those events, there were asks for key messaging and translation into local languages. And this options paper is a response to those kinds of requests. And so I want to acknowledge the eagerness that we've heard from you and from other stakeholders here at the COP for this kind of awareness raising. And as a practitioner in the land sector, we also recognize the need to integrate land tenure and land governance programming with the programming of the UNCCD and other Rio conventions. And so to again encourage you that this paper is available to you, and we hope that you will explore the options that are available within the paper and that you'll choose those that are most suitable to your national and local contexts, and that you'll follow up with the Secretariat if you have any questions. Thank you so much. I'll turn it back over to the moderator.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you for sharing the effective awareness raising on land tenure. We have another presenter, Oscar Soria from Avaz, representing international NGOs. Oscar, you may start. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here at the UNCCD. Avaz is a movement of 70 million members that are around the world and that already are campaigning for land tenure. Already more than 800,000 people has been, and counting, are still campaigning for this. I want just to show you one map. I don't know if you can actually have it in the... So this map that you are seeing is pretty much a reconstruction of how the world was back in 300 years ago. The next one shows how is right now our world. And as you know, humanity has coexisted with the rest of the living world in very different ways for millennia. But over the few centuries, in the last 300, the economics of the Western colonial powers had led to major changes on how humans are using the planet, with more than half of the surface that now can be considered as being used intensively. I want just to show you another graphic regarding to that. So what you're going to see there is an evolution on how, if you click it again in the animation, you will see how our society has been actually intensively using our planet to a point in which now we are just in an ecological crisis. And I think this is an important element to take into account, because there's been a lot of discussions about, and I want to name it, that's how much indigenous communities are at also of conservation. And the last scholar, I mean, all the scholarship that has come in from now were very clear that we've been okay for the last 12,000 years, but then something happens, and still there's a lot of questions about how that, where we are, why we are in this point. And one of the things that the questions about the degradation, we've been just trying to look at this, and in the conversation around conservation and the conversations around land use has been always divided in this type of narratives, who actually does best. And I think that the critical work of halting the triple crisis of biodiversity loss, climate change, and desertification now must begin just from a space of restoring and reconciling the relationship with land and the people who live in it, but especially with indigenous peoples and local communities who have been sidelined in environmental policy circles. And I think that there is something that right now, in this moment of the ecological crisis that we live, we need just to recognize the role of indigenous peoples. And there is an overwhelming evidence in the last decade, actually, in which IPBES and many other reports, and even now economical and financial institutions, are recognizing the role of indigenous peoples in that front, and minorities, and as our previous speaker talked about. And I think that there is another element about power dynamic that has been also mentioned here, and is also the responsibilities of the countries in the global north, that in fact in this convention has a financial responsibility, and it's basically in the Article 6 of the conventions that it says that that they have to provide substantial financial resources and other formal support to assist affected developing country parties, particularly those in Africa, to promote the mobilizations of new and additional funding pursuant to Article 20, and encourage the mobilization of funding from private sectors and other non-governmental sources. And I think that this is an important element now to really just bring that element and call all the parties that came from, mostly of the parties that are here, also came from nations that precede your countries, precedes those nations. And while this is a party-led convention like any other Rio Convention, I think that there is not just a moral debt on bringing those previous nations to work together in this new journey for ecological reconciliation, but also is a strategic element here to take into account. One of the things that in the last conversation that we have seen, and we have a campaign called Land Rights Now. I don't know if you can actually show and just keep it. This is, we have, in Avast, we've been working with indigenous communities across the world, and they are asking not just to be recognized as nations, but also to really bring them into the table. And we have seen in many occasions governments trying to sideline indigenous communities because they don't know much, because they might be illiterate and so on. And we are ignoring the potential of their traditional knowledge, their wisdom. And one of the things that we believe that we need just to also do in the Rio Conventions is to try to decolonize our mindset and really put indigenous peoples and local communities at the center of these conversations. In part because even the Bretton institutions and international financial institutions are recognizing also the role of indigenous peoples and local communities. And it has to do, I think, also with the fact that today the world is also reckoning to the issue of ecological debt. After COVID-19 and during COVID-19, the issue on debt is been very strong and more strong than ever. And I think that the time has come now to bring the issue of the ecological debt. And one of the things that we have seen, for instance, the IMF and others are noting that it's urgent for the international community to gradually increase official development aid to meet the UN target of 0.7% of gross national income to help low-income developing countries to achieve their development objectives by 2030. And in that front, one key element that this convention is really advancing more than any other convention is the role of indigenous peoples and land rights. And I think now we need just to move a little bit further and really consider direct financing for the indigenous peoples and local communities, because that's going to be a key element to support indigenous peoples and local communities who are the frontline workers of our planetary health. And the evidence is overwhelming in, well, you name it, IMF, the World Economic Forum, the Nature Conservancy reports, the Paulson Institute reports, all of them are actually saying it's more effective, more efficient to put money directly to indigenous communities to do what they know best. And I think the time has come for all of us to correct the wrongs of the colonial past and the extractive economy that we live in, and not just do it just for indigenous peoples, but for all of us, in order just to bring the harmony that our past economies has broken to us. And I think that's coming back to to the beginning of this conversation. We have seen a lot of indigenous people that has died during the COVID-19, and I think many of them has been defending the lands in a moment where many of us, we were actually having conversation via Zoom. So I think this is the time just to put indigenous communities and local communities in the center and really honor their wisdom and bring them to the table. The time has come. Thank you.
Thank you, Oscar. Colleagues, panelists, thank you all for your wonderful presentations and great inputs. I now launch this session's dialogue and invite the parties for their interventions. May we take your comments and questions? First to speak, we give the floor to Palaus. Okay, we'll take Argentina. Argentina, you may speak now. You have to press the floor. Press once more. Now you may speak. It's red now.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Sorry. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Moderator, President of COP. I'd like to particularly thank you for giving us this forum where civil society was able to speak. We as governments are those who are welcoming all of the efforts that they have made to come here to be part of this convention, to be part of the implementation of this convention in each of their countries, with enthusiasm and with this capacity and ability that they have shown in their presentations, which very often go beyond the abilities of their own governments, and sometimes as we manage land, we are falling far behind, and we would like them to continue to walk hand in hand with us along this path. They should be close to the strategies, to the public policies that we as governments have in terms of land management, combating desertification, and mitigation efforts against drought. Within these associations, civil society, there's a whole range of organizations, and this is extremely important because within this convention they're included, and I think this is the case in other conventions as well. It includes farmers, indigenous farmers, heads of families. It includes college agronomics teachers. It's a very wide range of different stakeholders that are included in the civil society organizations within this convention. We would like them to help us, to assist us in working and to fight against these new challenges, which at the moment is to provide the fourth report for the review committee, and there's a technical part which needs to be covered. There's a lot of information that has to come from the land, from the grassroots organizations, from those places where people are working and caring for the land. So, in Argentina, we will call upon these civil society organizations in Argentina so that we can have specific results and have information in various fora about how best to manage the land. In conclusion, I would like to express, or rather make an appeal to all organizations within the system of the United Nations and the Secretariat, all those who can assist our governments which have been affected, developing countries' governments, to set up a network which is strengthened by NGOs. I would like once again to thank you for providing us with this space. You may count on our support to continue the work which remains to be done. I thank you.
Thank you, Argentina. Ecuador, you may speak.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, President. We would like to echo the congratulations made regarding this forum and to thank everyone who has spoken from civil society and who have shared with us first-hand experience of the realities on the ground on land degradation and drought and other phenomena which are becoming greater and greater and are becoming more and more urgent for us to deal with using the tools that we have, which is the Convention and its primary mechanisms. In that regard, we believe that the implementation action of the Convention, but also the environmental action, should be working in synergy, and it should be from the ground upwards and take into account the needs that have been proposed and the specific actions that have been shown to us by non-state actors, and not just work on the state's behalf. We are very interested in hearing their stories and working together hand in hand. We have a plan in Ecuador which is fortunate. It's an open manner of working, and we facilitate transparency wherever we can and look at actions which have been undertaken before, but even more so nowadays. In Mercosur, for example, as was pointed out by Antigua Barbuda, the representative from Antigua Barbuda, it is very important to use this very important tool, which is so important for all of us. This should go from the local level to the national level, and then to the regional, and finally the international level, from the grassroots up, from a rights-focused approach. We must appreciate what we've learned and respect that this is a universal right to a clean environment. And in many countries, this is already understood and is within domestic law, but it must be implemented in all member states. It's very important to have special rapporteurs who are able to report on environmental aspects and environmental rights. And there's a link as well between climate change and human rights. This must be utilized, this must be strengthened and translated into action from the grassroots up in synergy, and it's becoming even more urgent that we work closely with the other conventions as well. All I wanted to do was to assure you of my support to all of the voices from the civil society organizations, the NGOs who have spoken this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Ecuador. Next, thank you. We have the International Labour Organization.
No.
Okay, we'll switch to India. You may speak now.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all the panelists for such a wonderful sharing of experiences from all across the globe. So that was a very, very heartening to see, and especially it is very unique for the UNCCD to include civil services, civil society organization into the fold of the deliberation and participation of NGOs and civil society organization in the fold of the COP and plenary and COW and almost all the deliberation in this convention. This is very unique. I don't think so that is being done in other convention. I don't know. I need to be educated on that. Coming to India, India has one of the largest network of NGOs and the civil society organization, and they have been doing a tremendous work. And being a large country and a complex country with so much of diversity in culture, region, and society, without NGO, you cannot get all the government policy on the ground. They are interface between the government and the local organization, local farmers, and without that, I don't think so that all the policy and projects of the government can be effectively implemented. So it is a unique opportunity for the country, for the government, and for the UNCCD to take up the advantage that we get from the civil society organization as a main key interface between the local and the government. And one of the most important things that I find with the civil society organization is that they can take up any innovative projects. They can do research, they can bring technology, they can transfer technology, and they can do research and development on various issues of environmental conservation, development, and advocacy, which a government or any other big organization is very difficult because of its big structure, because of its inertia, because of so much of bureaucracy. It is not able to do the innovation and transfer of technology so quickly as a civil society organization. That is the main advantage they have. And the second best advantage they have is that they are with the farmers. They have the local knowledge. They have the local technologies. They have the local skills. So therefore, they are the repository of all the local know-how. Without that, a government at the center or the state cannot directly intervene and work. So to be a project to be successful, I think the civil society organization has a main role to play. Because I have been working with many civil services society organization in India, and I found that they know each and every aspect of the land, its degradation, its productivity, its marketing, the problem of drought, the flood, and how small thing they do and make it in a big impact on the whole issue. So I appreciate the UNCCD for giving them a chance and a platform to share the knowledge of their experience all across globe and helping them to help the planet Earth. So I urge that to document all the knowledge and that to be documented and disseminated and help them and help the planet and the land. So I find that this is the key issue. Without that, without the support of the civil society organization, I don't think so that any projects by the government could be so successful. I thank you all, and I salute all for your selfless work and contribution to the land degradation, desertification, and drought. Thank you so much.
Thank you, India. I'd like to get back to the International Labour Organization. Your microphone is D5. D5.
Oh, no. Mister, this one is open now. Oh.
There.
Okay, sure.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for your indulgence. And Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the International Labour Office congratulates the government and the people of Côte d'Ivoire for hosting the COP15 and the engagement of civil society organizations in this important effort. Combating desertification and land degradation effectively is indispensable to promote a decent work for all, to advance social justice, and to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. An estimated 1.2 billion jobs depend on healthy and well-functioning ecosystems. Agriculture, which is the largest employer in the world, provides a livelihood to over 1 billion people, and it involves many indigenous and tribal peoples. And I would like to remind that there is a specific Convention 169 concerning indigenous and tribal peoples at the ILO. Desertification and land degradation therefore impacts negatively on jobs, lead to unwanted labor migration, and exacerbates crisis situations. Yet a positive narrative is possible. There is an enormous opportunity for decent work creation through programs on land restoration, using employment-intensive approaches, public works programs, and enterprise development approaches. The ILO has estimated that 100 million jobs can be created by ensuring an ecological transition that fully takes into account those social dimensions. The actors in the world of work, the representatives of governments, but also employers and workers' organizations are an important agent of change in this process. The ILO currently works to foster a greater understanding of the nature and scale of opportunities to create employment through the convention. For example, the ILO and UNEP and IUCN and other partners in civil society organizations are working on a new flagship report titled Decent Work and Work in Nature-Based Solutions, which we're defining as an approach for member states and actors in the convention to measure the employment opportunity through a rigorous framework, and that would guide our process. So we're also working with IUCN on a barometer to assess the employment opportunity of restoration, so that there is an indicator on employment creation in restoration programs. So with all of this, the ILO looks forward to engaging with parties and actors in civil society organizations to reflect fully in the outcomes of this conference these social and employment dimensions, which we believe can enable ambitious action against desertification and land degradation, but at the same time delivering more and better jobs, which are particularly needed in the African continent where we are in. Thank you very much for the attention and the opportunity to make this intervention.
Thank you, ILO. I give the floor to the civil society organizations.
Yeah, the chairman of the meeting and the panelists, happy evening to all of you. Yeah, I think on behalf of the CSOs who are present here, I wish to congratulate for the wonderful presentation made by all the panelists. I think all of you did an excellent presentation for which we are extremely happy. Yeah, moving ahead, I have certain observations and then I put across a general question to all the panelists. When we look at the previous COP14, I think we had a remarkable decision which was taken with regard to the land tenure. And in this regard, I wish to congratulate all the parties for taking an excellent and wise decision on time. And now this is the time to move forward with regard to the decision that was taken in the COP14. It is important to involve the concerned departments and the ministries of the country. And in across, we got different people working at the different levels, grassroots levels, organizations, communities, NGOs. And I feel that all the people who are associated, the primary stakeholders and the secondary stakeholders should be well informed with regard to the decision that was taken in COP14 and expecting further development. Coming to the question to all the panelists, it's a general question. Could you please share your experiences from your countries, how the government is implementing the COP14 tenure decision with regard to the land tenure which was taken. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity given.
Thank you. And we have one more comment from the civil society organizations.
Merci.
Thank you very much, moderator. Thank you very much to the presenters. Thank you to all the participants. I am so happy to be able to be here this evening and to be able to express my satisfaction with regard to the initiatives and the proposals that have been taken up and worked upon in the different countries with regard to this very thorny issue, which is that of soil degradation and particularly drought in Africa, as on so many other continents that we are undergoing these days. It's true that soil degradation, land degradation and drought, it's not just come about today. We have to accept that many debates, dialogues, consultations have taken place, have been organized in order to mitigate bit by bit and move towards resilience and to prevent this land degradation and droughts. And given the presentations made that concern the communities that we are working on, who are developing actions to fight against drought, and which can be a source of inspiration that can be taken to scale, I would like to ask one question. And this is addressed particularly to the panelists. Madame Bex-Robert, who can perhaps tell us what are the types of support that they would like to have to bring these actions on the part of humans to scale. Which are the populations concerned? Which are the ones which have the most need? The donors, the scientists, the technical and financial partners. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And there is another request from the CSOs.
Thank you very much for this very interesting presentations. My name is Nathalie van Haren and I work at both ends and a CSO from the Netherlands. We heard about these very nice community-based initiatives that provide good livelihoods and at the same time support and restore soil health and protect biodiversity. It would be great if more communities would be supported to adopt these kinds of initiatives. What we hear is that many donors and international funds are committed to support these kinds of action. Could you elaborate on the financial support that was made available by donors and international funds to upscale these community-based initiatives? Thank you.
Thank you. I now invite all the panelists to address the comments and questions that came from the parties. Maybe we'll start with Oscar. You may.
Yeah, so I wanted just to address the last question, because in fact, as we mentioned before, there is an overwhelming evidence about how the results, the outcome of indigenous peoples in terms of effectiveness and efficiency, effectiveness, cost efficiency even. I want to read some of the part that we find out. For instance, I want to read just a little bit one part of our report very quickly. That we say the independence evaluations confirms that while conservation projects involving indigenous peoples have better than average implementation records, support for these projects is limited in scale and scope. that's basically the independent evaluation of the GEF. And also the GEF engagement with Indigenous People report. But also IFAD's Indigenous Peoples Assistance Facility and the GEF UNDP Small Grants programs are also two examples of very successful and that leverage Indigenous people's own vision and development, but also are constrained. I'm going to give you an example. During COVID-19, I had a situation, so in Avaz, we, during that time, as you know, Indigenous communities has been affected by the COVID-19. No country actually has any specific plan for protecting Indigenous peoples and local communities. And a lot of NGOs, including Avaz, we had just to put our own money to try just to put it, and even helping to the GEF UNDP in giving grants in order just to have Indigenous communities, basically cultures that we need to protect, because those cultures are the cultures that has the technology, the wisdom to protect our environment. So I think that the frustration that we are seeing in a lot of Indigenous communities is the fact that the money doesn't come immediately to them directly. They have just to come through governments, agencies, NGOs, and I think the evaluations, for instance, from independent economists, and we hired a bunch of different economists across the world, it is clear that if we actually create direct financing to Indigenous communities, which are right now are very small and very few, actually there is not enough, that will actually untap a huge potential for Indigenous communities to address land degradation and biodiversity loss.
Thank you, Oscar. Beth, may we take you next? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator, and thank you so much for the question. So I'll summarize the focus for what I believe is the most crucially needed support in two phrases. And the first is policy cohesion, and the second is inclusion. So policy cohesion, I talked about a little bit earlier in my remarks on the options paper. In terms of support from parties, making sure that there is connection, both bilaterally between agencies and then with international institutions and with civil society, to make sure that there are conversations between actors that are responsible for land degradation neutrality programming and between land administration and land tenure, land governance. And the civil society actors, the grassroots actors, the human rights defenders that are active on the ground, that are the most knowledgeable about the challenges that are impacting communities with regard to both land degradation and land tenure insecurity. There is a need for those voices to inform policy and for policy to cut across different agencies. And so in terms of support, donors can fund policy cohesion. Policy cohesion is something that often goes overlooked and is crucially needed to support action that achieves the ends of both land tenure security and land degradation neutrality. So that's one arena where I think support is very much lacking and very essential to achieve the common goals that we're talking about this evening. The second arena where support is crucial and again lacking is inclusion. And here I want to take a little bit of time to talk specifically about women's land tenure security. My colleague Ishmael spoke earlier about women's lack of access to land and lack of land tenure security, specifically in Senegal and in the Democratic Republic of Congo. We see this everywhere we work. We see that land is seen as a male purview. And we also know on the flip side, so we know that women lack equitable access to land and equitable legal rights to land in practice, despite those rights being enshrined from international levels to national levels in law and policy. And on the flip side, we know that when women have secure rights to land, when women have, that what women do with land is protect biodiversity, engage in ecological approaches to managing land and forests, and that women are primary food producers for the family, that when women have resources, they engage in sustainable practices, and there are innumerable co-benefits to families, to communities. And so investing in women's land tenure specifically has incredible ripple effects for all of the outcomes that we're talking about, for land degradation neutrality, for land tenure security, for climate action, for sustainable development. And so in terms of inclusion, making sure that women within indigenous and customary communities, making sure that their voices are heard, and making sure that those communities are engaged with in customarily appropriate ways. So engaging with indigenous communities in ways that honor the ways that indigenous women are advocating for their own rights, in ways that engage customary, traditional, and religious leaders, in ways that aim to transform gender dynamics and other dynamics that exclude those who have the weakest access to tenure and who have the weakest links to policy spaces. So in terms of support and resources, looking for those who are most active on land degradation, on restoration activities and on tending to ecosystems, but have the least resources and the least voice. So inclusion and policy cohesion would be my two biggest categories that I would urge support for. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. I'll now turn to the panelists on my right side and ask them to intervene. Mrs. Ruth?
A lot of what happens depend on like your personal commitment. I sit on government committees and we go through project documents, we design policies, but then it seems to stop there. The advocacy that should go to the local groups, I have to do it. And because of my values, to whom much is given, much is required, I make the extra effort. So when I'm going to a group, if I'm discussing, say, a Mercury project, or we lead on Mercury phase down, I would bring in other policies that need to be discussed. The NB SAPs, the national reporting. I will have to organize dialogues, bring the groups together to get their contributions to go into those reports. If I don't do it, it doesn't happen. And we don't want, when we are submitting reports, to do it on guess. We want actual facts. We want the evidence. And so it's very important that the situation gets better, that the government agencies do more advocacy, more outreach. We understand they're limited, in an 8 to 4 hour in their offices. But the groups meet in the afternoons, they meet in the evenings because they do voluntary work. They work in the day, so you can only meet with them in the evenings, and you have to go to the communities where they live and where they work if you want an effective and timely engagement. When you want to hear from the people, you need to go where they are. Don't expect them to come into the city when you plan a meeting. And so we have to work to make things better for people. As the last speaker said, we need full inclusion and their participation. And going forward, people want that engagement. People have the knowledge, they have the understanding, they have the observations. And many times when you listen to the radio, they're giving free knowledge. They're saying, if you do that project, such and such will happen. This is the kind of knowledge we want to fill gaps into our projects and our policies. Listen to the people. They're not asking to be paid for this knowledge. And many times, instead of accepting the knowledge from the people, We threaten them, we harass them, and all they're doing is seeking to protect these ecosystems. See, all they want to do is to protect the people, to safeguard these ecosystems that we depend on for food, for water, for air. And so the matter of protection of environmental defenders is very, very important, because these are lives being lost, lives being harassed just because they speak out for the environment. So I'm an optimist. I'm hoping for things to get better. I'm hoping that stronger advocacy will prevail, that we can do our work without harm being done to us and our characters. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Rose. And Hermanta, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I think we are talking about very, very complex issue. My interest is actually when we are talking about national policies, laws, regulations, those are quite old. That's one of the issue for us, because when the colonial rulers came to my country, so they have put more than 80% of the land under the wasteland ordinance, and then they consider them as a wasteland which is owned by the British Crown. And then these are the public lands. Sometimes half of these public lands actually, there's no proper control. And these kind of old rules, regulations, guidelines, etc., actually is giving complications if you want to bring the conservation into the ground. So even the people in my country, I think about 60–65% of the people doesn't own the land title. Especially the people working in the plantation sector, they don't have a land title. They cannot even build their house. They cannot even build their toilet. They cannot do the farming in those areas. So with that kind of regulations, how one can enter into the conservation of the land? I think this is one of the area. I think many of the speakers mentioned about the indigenous people's rights, the local community rights, and also there are other communities like the people who have brought from certain countries as the workers, so they don't have the rights at all. And I think this is an extremely complex issue, and also now in the UNCCD, UNFCCC, so we are making these kind of policies that goes to the national level government bodies, but when it goes down to the local agencies, because in every government you have different layers, provincial level, state level, the local level, and one good example is that when the international level you make the sustainable development goals, and many of the local level organizations like the provincial, the local councils, they were trying to understand what this is and where they can get involved. And of course, one of the big problem was the funding, because the government, especially the developing country government, doesn't have money because it's a voluntary thing. But without money, definitely some of those things cannot happen. But at the same time, money is not the only issue, but I think the real ownership to the land, as well as these kind of some kind of regulations which is resisting people's engagement on the land. Because when it's a government-owned land, if people go and do something, so that may be illegal. So therefore, you have to think about how do you bring this policy coherence between the global level and the national level and at the grassroots level. So I think unless we resolve these kind of issues, it is very hard, even if we make good policies at the national level, when it go into the implementation, it will take years, and by the time maybe many of those things may be gone. So I think that's my appeal again, so that let's think about how immediate we can bring these important issues, important policy decisions to the ground level, because as we all understood that the people are living on the ground, and without people's support, definitely we cannot implement these kind of things. So to get that support, you really need to resolve these kind of policy level and the regulation level issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Hermanta. Ismail, may we take the one last final comment from you, please?
Ok, donc merci.
Thank you very much. The most difficult work that has to be done in terms of access to ownership of land is to have the social and legal norms change, those which do not allow women access to ownership of land. In Niger, we've had some experience, which is the rural court, which goes from the highest levels to the lowest through the communities. So it's villagers who have looked at this issue of land ownership, but also the management of conflicts around scarce natural resources. But as I've just said, the most important thing, there is legislation. It needs to be implemented and enforced, but it is a problem of cultural issues, which we cannot understand, that here in the 21st century, women does not have the right to own land. The organization of civil society, I'll speak about the experience that we have that I've had in my particular organization. At small scale, we experimented with a project around restoration and recovery of land. What was that exactly? Well, we were recuperating the degraded soil in Niger. We have quite a large proportion of land which is degraded. So we secure it, we restore it, and what we've done is we gave this land to women over 10 years so that they're able to set it up so it becomes productive and part of the value chain. And during that time, these women are given the financial capacity so that they're able to acquire their own land. So land degradation is an inequality, but it can be used as an opportunity. And this opportunity can be seized by working with legislation so that once the land has been recovered, it goes to the most vulnerable sectors of the population. And another issue that should be elucidated, and I mentioned it in my presentation, is the poor knowledge of women themselves about the rights that they have to own land. When you tell a woman you have a right to this land, she asks, where is it written? Well, it's in our domestic legislation, but many women do not know this. And so from social and cultural reasons, they do not understand that they have rights. So civil society work is to inform and to innovate in the restoration and providing value through such good initiatives, which should be put to scale. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, everyone. Thank you very much for this interactive open dialogue. And I'd like to thank especially those who have stayed through the end of this session and contributed with their interventions. We appreciate it. And in winding up, I hope this session has given you a lot of thought, food for thought. And we heard some great examples on community-based initiatives. We witnessed the evidences on the ecological crisis for yet another time. And we saw various solutions. And we all share the urges expressed in this session related to inclusivity, especially for women, youth, indigenous people, and local communities. Solutions are there. Hear everyone's voice, and let's work together. Before we wrap up the session, I'd like to invite you all to a short guided meditation to bring the elements to our mindful inner. This practice lasts for 5 minutes and will be facilitated by Brahma Kumari's organization. I'll invite Ms. Aneta to the stage.
Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen, my sisters and brothers, thank you very much for this opportunity. I would like to invite you for a peaceful, quiet, personal moment to relax and recharge. This time is for you. We have heard so many beautiful things that we all do, and there is much more to do, but we need to do it with enthusiasm, with power, with love. So let us explore our inner resources and how we can use them in the conscious way in the journey from scarcity to prosperity. So I would like to ask you just to relax, make yourself comfortable, relax your body. I will offer some thoughts, and you may choose to follow them to create your own experience. So you can keep your eyes open, you may close them. Just enjoy the process as we go. Having heard so many things, so many challenges in front of us, so many opportunities and solutions, let's take a moment and reflect and empower the self. Let's become still. I am the part of the solution to restore the degraded land, the land that we live on, the land that we use, the land that we protect, the land that we care for, the land to which we all belong. So the land can heal itself. The earth can regenerate herself. I turn my attention inwards, and in my inner space, I concentrate, I focus my attention into one stable point of light. And as I do it, I feel the peacefulness inside me growing. And as the peace grows, my power grows. Peace and power. This is my true nature. So let me acknowledge them. Let me own them. Let me embody them. And in this light of consciousness, I can see the earth, the blue pearl floating in the outer space. I see it from above. I feel light. I am free. I am unlimited. And looking at this beautiful pearl from outside, I see there are no borders. There are no separations. There are no differences of color, creed, gender. We all belong to one Mother Earth, the earth that has been sustaining us for millennia. I can see the sacred land, and observing them, my love, my respect, and my gratitude awaken in my heart. And these feelings flow out and embrace the whole world and all living beings. But let me enjoy this beautiful moment. I see on the screen of my mind lush, fertile land with vibrant colors of green and gold. I can see lively rivers with fresh and pure water. I can see vast and rich oceans. And seeing all of that, I realize that the earth itself has potential to heal herself. And with my clarity of what I can do, and with my power of love, I know it is possible. So not only my hope gets ignited, but I get confidence that it will happen. I have clarity in my mind of what new things I can do in this unlimited consciousness and with this power inside. I am a peaceful and powerful being. And I know that the world will return to its state of harmony and abundance. So now I come back to the consciousness of the present, to here and now, but I keep the experience of lightness, the experience of newness, and the experience of my inner power in my heart. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank
Aneta.
you.
This has been wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll draw the session to a close now and we'll pass it over to Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Gasimova. I also thank our speakers today and all delegations for actively participating in this important dialogue. Let me share a few reflections with you on this dialogue. First of all, the recognition to the organizations of civil society, because they are very important for share, for diffuse our needed awareness, consciousness about our dependence of land and the necessity of engage all of us for land. If only we think that Africa, Latin America, small islands, developing states are a big portion of the surface of the planet, and all of us are very impacted and affected for land degradation, we can interpret and remember the focus of this presentation, of this session. The focus is develop our common vision, where cooperation, solidarity with the land, which is of the essence of our life and our planet. So to include indigenous people, women, gender, youngs, rural community, small farmers, what for subsistence are elevators and also élevage and also agricultures, but especially the most vulnerable sectors, which are all about Africa, Latin America, and Caribbean, seeds, and all the planet, has to be our focus to accomplish our goal. Then the call of Abidjan is also explained by this session, because it is a call for leave no one behind. Now, distinguished delegates, we have now come to the end of our open dialogue on the inclusion of activities of civil society organizations within the official program of work of the Conference of the Parties. The next meeting of the Conference of the Parties will take place on Friday, 13 May, in this room, immediately after the adjournment of the CST. Thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.